Good morning, good morning.
Living life is fun and we've just begun to get our share of this world.
Happy Friday, everybody.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Yes.
And our goals in sight. We know we don't get depressed. Here's what we call our golden rule. Have faith in you and the things you do. You won't go wrong. Oh no, this is our family jewel. We are family. Sing it to me. I got my sisters with me. Sing it to me. I can hear you, y'all. Everybody say, we have faith in you and the things you do. Hey, hey, I got my sisters with me.
Right, good morning, everybody. It's great to see you. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. We're very happy to see you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen just for a moment so I can focus on you. Let's see. I don't want to end the meeting. That would be bad. Oh my goodness. I would be good at this by now. All right. My screen. There it is. There's the stop share. All right. Good to see you, everybody. Happy Friday. I hope you enjoyed your DPLC time. I can tell you that we are very happy to be together as a staff today. It's been a journey, and we are still on this journey. We're so proud of each and every one of you for working through this last pivot on the mass change. We know that change is hard, but we're getting good at it at Mountain View. And so we're really excited about today's topic. Today's topic is going to be really talking about the policy on the treatment of transgender and gender expansive students. This is close to all our hearts at Mountain View because the policy is really about creating a supportive school culture and advocating for the well-being of students. And that's all students. And so I have a brief introduction that I want to do that will connect today's topic to our work at Mountain View. And then I'm just so delighted. You are going to love having the time that we have today with DeHaven of Side by Side. She just puts me at ease. She helps me feel calm. She answers my questions so patiently because, you know, we're all learners in school. Our children are learners and we're learners. And so this is just a great opportunity for us to come together, learn together, and then talk together about how we're going to continue to do what we do well at Mountain View, which is make our school inclusive for all students and staff. So let me share my screen and get to our faculty meeting slide deck. And we're starting with the end, but we'll come back to that. So really it's do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. And that's, I feel like, is a great mantra for us all days, but especially today. So today we are going to spend time till about 11:30 today working together. I'll set the stage through the policy. DeHaven is going to talk to us. We'll have time to break out by PLCs to talk about what she presents today. And then we'll have a closing reflection and then PLC work time this afternoon. So while we all wish we were together, it would be so much more fun in person. We'll take advantage of having Zoom, and today's really connects also to rule number 4 of our energy bus, which is love your passengers. And we couldn't do this work without you. So just to kind of set the stage for us, Mountain View's vision that we talked about and we revised really connects to Albemarle County's vision, where we want every learner is empowered to actively and confidently thrive every day. That's our North Star, what we aim to do. And I think we do a great job of this, and we can always continue to learn and get better, all of us. Our mission at Mountain View is for all students to achieve academic success to the best of their ability. In order for that to happen, they have to feel safe and feel included. And we've had a lot of children recently like popping with their social emotional issues. That is normal when there's change, but we always come back to our North Star and our anchor is to really help our children achieve that academic success. So therefore, we embrace our diverse students and families, and together we value anti-racism, bilingualism, and multiculturalism. And that connects to Albemarle County's mission, which is working together as a team will end the predictive value of race, class, gender, and special capacities for our children's success through high quality teaching and learning for all. And we know every student, and we are so proud how well you know your students, how well you share that with us. And when I was able to go to our mid-year review this year, I was able to talk about how we know every student and our processes for showing their growth. So that was because of you. Our values are the same as Albemarle County's, which is equity, excellence, family and community, and wellness. And so, and again, in addition to Albemarle County's values, we really value diverse students, families, and staff. It's one of the things that makes Mountain View special. It makes people want to come to Mountain View and be at Mountain View and stay at Mountain View. And I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. When we come together as a staff, these are our community agreements. We just make sure everyone has a chance to speak with equity of voice. We are kind, honest, and professional. And I think this is a big one for today. We respect different perspectives, each other's time and feelings. So there are different perspectives, and that's what makes our community amazing. And so this is a time and a day that I hope that we also feel vulnerable in asking questions. Like I was asking DeHaven some questions, and she helped me feel very safe, because this is a new evolving learning for me as well. So I'll let DeHaven talk about how she wants to talk about our session and how she wants to have that be engaging. So
Cindy, can I jump in really quickly if you can hear me?
Yes, yeah.
So sorry to interrupt you. And
No, not at all.
I do not mean to speak for you, DeHaven, so please correct me. I want to be sure that I believe that DeHaven prefers to refer to as they, if I'm looking at the
Thank
program.
you very much.
If I'm wrong about that, DeHaven, I am so sorry, but I just wanted to jump in and make sure I said that.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for correcting me. And yes, DeHaven, I'm very sorry as I'm learning along that, but thank you. That's really important. That's a great model of what we're talking about, is that, yes, I can see now, because you're showing up on my screen, your preferred pronouns are they, them. So thank you very much, John, and thank you very much, DeHaven, for modeling what this day is exactly about: being vulnerable, being open, and being honest and direct and addressing it. So thank you, thank you. So before we get into the topic, to a little personal reflection, just wondering how you're feeling about today's topic. I can tell you that I'm personally in the green. I'm very excited to be continue learning. And just like we do with our students, we should honor ourselves as learners. And this day is really for us. So wherever you are is wherever you are, but we hope that by the end, you are feeling green and excited about supporting our students as well. Before, again, I turn it over to DeHaven, this part of this conversation and how we're going through this is making me remember the courageous conversations about race protocol. We all approach conversations through different lenses. Some of us approach it through a moral compass. Some approach through an intellectual compass. Some through a relationship, and some through emotions and feelings. We all use elements of each, but one of our approaches, it may recall these conversations we had last year. So I'm hoping, again, you see the continuation and the braiding and the connections from conversations we've had in the past to a conversation we're going to have today. And Mountain View's ready for this conversation, and I'm very excited. Last but not least, before I turn it over again, I thought this was a great personal reflection. This is adapted from also Courageous Conversations About Race. Take a moment of personal reflection, and on a scale of 1 to 5, how comfortable are you talking about transgender, gender expansive issues? So 1 would, we don't really talk about this in my house and I'm not comfortable. 2, I would like to feel more comfortable, but I'm not sure I am ready yet. 3, I have been part of gender conversations, but I don't know what to say. 4, I feel pretty comfortable talking about gender with my friends. And 5, I am having gender conversations about gender with people inside and outside of my community. I can tell you that having a 19 and a 23-year-old, I have lots of conversations at home, and I am very lucky to have children who work with me, who correct me, and help me along. And so this is very personal for me, and I hope it's very personal for many of you too, because that's where I approach the relationship piece. This is about people. Our work is about people. And so how do we help everyone feel included? So that's just a moment of personal response. You don't need to put it in the chat, just for you. Okay. So with that said, I'm going to turn it now over to DeHaven. And again, thank you so much for being here, DeHaven. And I did link to the resources. It's in our PowerPoint, our slide deck for everybody. DeHaven has given us many resources, and I'm going to turn it over to them right now.
Awesome. Thank y'all. How are people doing this morning? We're all right. We're plucking along. Love it. Love it. Am I able to share my screen? I am. Okay. I don't want to mess up the process. All right, cool. I don't know why this is still so awkward sometimes, like done this many times. One day it will feel natural. By the time it feels natural, everything will be in person. That's how that's going to work. But yeah, I'm really, really excited to spend time with y'all today. And I appreciate y'all showing up and already just like the clear energy that folks have. I always say that working with elementary schools is quickly becoming my favorite space because the energy and the passion and the openness and willingness to engage is just at a next level. And I just kind of plug into y'all's energy and take it off from there. So just really appreciate everything that y'all are doing for students and just being here in the space. So Cindy already kind of took my first two slides, so we can like zip through these. But and along with kind of gauging where folks are at in their comfort with LGBTQ topics, what I really want to encourage is for people to take care of yourselves as humans. The more I visit K through 12 schools, the more I witness firsthand how it seems every single staff person has 20 jobs under their one perceived job title. And I'm like, okay, you say you're the math teacher, but actually you are like those whole like 50 other things. So y'all hold so much, and that's just professionally. So personally, I'm sure everyone has a lot going on as well. And there are so many stressors happening right now in the world. So please take care of yourself. I'm hyperactive ADHD. I have my little basketball ready to go. So if you need to move, pace, play, drink water, put your head down, like do whatever you need. I always feel a lot of pressure whenever I go to trainings to try to take in all the knowledge and take like endless notes and all that. I'm here, you have the slides, you have all these resources. I'll send my email. I just want this to be an ongoing conversation. So like Cindy said, please just show up to the best that you can today and give yourself grace if you feel like you're just not here at all. It's Friday, we're all limping along. So when I go to schools, one thing I also see is that folks are all over the place in this kind of spectrum of support, right? So I've met folks in trainings where people have literally come up to me and be like, hey, at the start of this training, I was an absolute hater. I was not okay with anything LGBTQ. And now I feel like I'm tolerant. I'm like, great, thank you. Like, thank you for sharing. We're all on a journey together. Love it. And then I've met folks very clearly like y'all, where we are allies, we are advocates, we are ready to go. The buy-in is there. We're rocking and rolling. And everyone kind of in between, right? And that's just school staff. So then if we bring in students, that might change the environment of our spectrum. If we bring in families, adults, guardians, that could change things as well. So I would love to hear from folks where y'all feel your school is just as a whole. If we take every level in, like, where do y'all think you're at? And this can absolutely be a fluid thing. And please feel free to just unmute and jump in. I very much want this to be like a conversation, as awkward as that is on Zoom.
I feel like we're in the accepting.
Accepting? Okay.
Yeah, just because I still would like to educate myself more on topic and learn more about it. Had to talk to others about it.
So you feel like to move to that next level, you just need more knowledge, a little bit more conversation, support, things like that. And then it's like, cool, like let's take it to that next step. Cool. Is there anyone else I'd like to share? Thank you.
Haven, I feel like it's a hard question to answer because some
Yeah.
people individually within the building probably see one side while others see another. So when you blend the whole school together, it's a rainbow.
Absolutely.
I think we know a lot of where we want to get to, or I hope we want to get to, but I'm finding that to be a hard question to answer as a whole school, because what I think is probably my own.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I mean, I think to your point, like that's exactly it. It is a hard question to ask, right? And we, at the end of the day, like I have no clue what's happening in the hearts and minds and souls of folks as we engage in these conversations, because folks could do things on the surface, but inside feel the exact opposite of everything that they're doing, right? So I think in my job, right, I very much believe in the power of education and the power of just honest spaces where we can say like, hey, this is where I'm at, these are my gaps, and meet people where they are so that hopefully we can move into a different color, into a different space of helping our students, right? So my goal for today is we're going to go over some of these like key foundational concepts and just kind of dive into each one, and hopefully that provides a depth of knowledge. And then we're going to go over some risk factors, as we call them, where there's a little bit of statistics, things like that. But then we're going to enter protective factors. So we're ending on a happier note. And with that, we're going to go into breakout rooms and kind of brainstorm through a student scenario that I created through kind of combining several student stories that I've met. So hopefully by the end of today, you'll feel like you're able to, one, identify where you're at in your color, but also how can I move either myself or some aspects of the school into a new space. So maybe if we feel like we're accepting, cool, let's move to ally. If I feel like I'm an ally, awesome, let's rock and roll into that active role of being an advocate. So that's kind of the layout of today. So this is our massive identity spectrums, right? So before we jump in, I just want to say that each of these lines are talking to one another, but they also exist separately, right? And I think what we are taught in our culture is that all of these lines are just kind of bunched together and they're all one messy blob. But in fact, each one has its own unique pulse vibe that needs to be acknowledged. And it's important to start breaking these pieces apart when we're serving LGBTQ youth. Also, I'm gonna try, I cannot like see it. I wanna like make my screen the whole thing, but I'm like having the worst time. Ah, that's not it. Never mind. Sorry, I'm trying to make my screen the whole screen. I just
I
can't
think
see 'cause
it's-
Zoom is
If your
blocking.
bottom
I
right
think it's under
corner
slideshow, and then you can hit present from current slide.
or up at the top, the little play button in your orange bar, that it looks like a little play
I
triangle.
know, I
and
just
then-
can't like,
You can't see that.
I can't see it because the Zoom thing is blocking it. So I'm kind of like, where am I? Am I about to draw on the slides? But I know that's like frustrating for folks.
You might want to stop screen share and make it big and then share screen again. That
Okay.
might help.
Thank y'all. All right, hold please. Thank you for your patience. Better? Yes, okay, there we go. Thank y'all. Y'all are smart. All right. We're off to a great start. We were thriving this morning. All right, so jumping in, right? So this is sex assigned at birth. So I don't know another way to enter this world, so I'll speak for myself. When I was born, I popped out of my mom and the doctors looked at my little naked baby body and they said, cool, this body is in the box of female, right? So this is based off of my physical shell, my body, my genitalia, my chromosomes, my hormones, all of these fancy things. So historically and presently, we have these two boxes to account for all of the diversity of human bodies. So we have male and we have female. So with this, right, we immediately have this assumption that we have these two bodies where every single person will fit. But unfortunately, what we have missed is that there's incredible diversity along the human body spectrum, and a lot of bodies don't neatly fit into these two categories. So that massive umbrella term is called intersex. And so I think the rough estimate is 1 in every 2,000, 1 in every 1,600. Another, like, I'm a very visual person. Another way to look at it is that there are as many folks with red hair as there are folks who are intersex. Do not go up to someone who has red hair and ask if they're intersex. Like, stats don't work like that. Don't do that. Probably will not go well. But I think it's just to say that this is much more common than we give it credit, right? And what's interesting is, if you go into like the history of the intersex movement, is that in some states, like I hear California pop up a lot, especially in like the 60s, 70s, is that a lot of times surgeries were done to manipulate the body to fit into these two categories, even though there was nothing physically wrong. So for example, a baby could have external genitals that are kind of ambiguous, right? It's like, I don't know quite where to put you. So if I'm reading this baby and I'm like, I think this is a penis, but I'm not quite sure, doctors would actually take a ruler. And if the genitals didn't hit X amount of length, then the body was physically altered to be like, okay, cool, we're putting you in the female box. But again, there's nothing physically wrong. It's just like our bias, our discomfort, and how do I put you? I need you to fit neatly. So a lot of work has been done to just try to create this pause and be like, hey, is there anything wrong? No. All right. So let's leave this baby. Let's like just let this body be, and we'll see what this person wants as they get older, as they identify, right? So if you hear about like intersex community, that's what all of those movements are about. Do y'all know Jamie Lee Curtis, the actress? I think she's actually intersex, or at least a massive advocate for the intersex community, just to put a face to that. So with sex assigned at birth, right, again, this is our physical body, our outward shell. So then we move to gender identity, and gender identity is our internal understanding of how I understand myself as a gendered being, right? Which is going to be very broad, very personalized. But what's key is that this is my internal world. So I can look at someone and make assumptions all day long about how they identify, but until I ask, I don't know. So with gender identity, the assumption is that my sex assigned at birth and my gender identity are going to align, right? And if you experience this, congrats, you are cisgender. So cisgender is not a slang or a hate term or anything like that. It's just to name an experience that a lot of folks have of their sex assigned at birth and their gender identity line up, they follow the nice little arrows. I also heard from a very smart Latin teacher that cis is kind of saying like it's Latin for same, like the arrows are lining up. I was a very average Latin student, so I was like, I'm just going to take your word for it, friend. So if you do not experience this alignment, the giant umbrella term is transgender. So with trans, totally fine to say transgender. You want to avoid saying transgendered or transgendering or like verbing it or making it a past tense. I was watching a show from the early 2000s and they were saying like transgenders. And I was like, oh no, let's not say we did, friend. Language has changed a lot, but you just want to use that person first language, right? So saying someone is a trans person of trans experience, anything like that, totally fine. But when working with trans youth, I think what's really important is that historically we have this narrative, even presently still, we have this narrative that a person is going to go from one side to the other, right? If I was assigned male at birth and I'm a person of trans experience, then I'm going to transition all the way into being the woman that I've always felt myself to be, or vice versa, right? And what I'm seeing more and more, especially as Gen Z slowly starts taking over the world, is that the trans experience can be anything along this line, right? I don't have to go from one side to the other, this kind of binary journey. I can be at any point along this line and I'm still trans, I'm still part of this community if I say I am. So I think that can just be really powerful and helpful when working with youth who are exploring their gender identity. If they feel this pressure, this expectation to go from one side to the other, it's like, hey man, like, what's your truth? What feels good for you? What feels right? Like, you do you and don't follow like the script that you might feel pressured to. So non-binary, non-binary is an umbrella term underneath the trans umbrella. Does that make sense? I need a visual for this because I feel like folks are sort of like, what? But someone who is non-binary essentially is anyone who feels their gender identity does not fit into the boxes of man, woman, boy, girl. Again, very, very broad. So with non-binary, this could be someone who feels like they don't fit into those binary boxes, right? Maybe feel like they're floating in between. So you might see youth who start the day saying, hey, my pronouns are he, him. By the end of the day, I'm feeling more feminine, so she, her. Or maybe I'm feeling like I'm a combination of both. And I'm sort of creating my own experience. If you don't know Janelle Monáe, the artist, actress, check out Janelle Monáe. She's a lovely, awesome human. But Janelle Monáe came out as non-binary, gender expansive, and vocalizes that they feel there's sort of this like gender experience. They don't want to follow a script. They want the freedom to create their own experience, right? And so for me, like me, myself, and I, as a non-binary person, I very much enjoy that freedom and that exploration, right? Like in my head, my gender identity is a 16-year-old skater boy, but I cannot skate. So I own a lot of Vans and I pretend that I'm like able to do all these things. And I'm like a surfboard skater person. And I'm so far from that. It's really quite incredible, but awesome at buying clothes to create that illusion, right? But what I love about the label of non-binary and they, them is I get to create my own brand, my own vibe of like what I call masculinity 2.0. I get to sort of find this balance of being able to be this wannabe surfer dude and then have a girls' night with my wife as we eat pizza and watch Gilmore Girls and Grey's Anatomy for the 100th time, right? But I feel like it just gives me this freedom to do that versus having the labels of woman or man where I'm just sort of like, how do I make this fit? They, them, non-binary gives me the chance to do that. And so with non-binary, really any of the LGBTQ identities you might encounter, I think what's really important is that one, you don't have to know all of the identities, right? Like I work at an LGBTQ center. I have been at Pride events where youth have come up to me and said like, hey, this is how I identify. And I'm like, awesome, never heard of it in my life. Like, that is beautiful. Like, yes, you do you. I'm gonna write it down and Google it and jump on TikTok to become relevant again, but I have no clue what you're talking about. And I think it's important to just name that you don't have to know everything and you can still honor and respect them and see them as humans, right? I'm sure if I had the chance to get to know all of y'all, there are pieces of your identities, of y'all's journey that I can't totally connect with or honor. But what I can do is learn and push myself to grow and empathize and connect and do the best I can to see and honor you as a full human, right? So if the whole like non-binary trans, you're just like, what is happening? Like, cool. Name where you're at. Is there a way to continue to grow? And above all, we can honor folks by using their chosen name, chosen pronouns, all of that cool stuff. So all this makes sense so far? Okay. I'm not trying to go too fast. I'm just trying to be mindful of time. Okay, cool. So with gender, right, we have these three kind of key dimensions. So we have body, identity, social. So each one of these elements work together to create this sense of congruence, to create this sense of like harmony, of euphoria, if you've ever heard that phrase. So what we want to do is we want to find ways to work with trans youth so that they're feeling this sense of harmony. They're being seen as who they truly are. They're being able to connect with their body and their identity at kind of every level. So with body, and I think body is particularly where we as a culture get really fixated on the trans community in general, regardless of age, is this relationship between a person's gender and their body, right? So unfortunately, I know youth who have been asked really, really invasive questions of like, what's in your pants? Kind of prove to me that you are who you say you are, right? And it's like, hey, let's remove this link of body equals gender and instead understand that gender is going to change on my culture, on my community, on where I'm at in time and space and geography and all of these different things. Like it's socially created, right? So what we want to do is help youth find this sense of harmony in their own body and figure out ways to help make them feel at home in their body, right? And then with identity, this is a person's internal experience and naming of their gender. So how we feel, understand, and experience it. So again, for me, that would be that 16-year-old skater boy, which is also rough because I'm 30. So I should probably look at that, right? Probably gonna have a midlife crisis when I turn 35. But it's helping youth kind of find their label, find their home, and figure out like, cool, you have all these feelings, all this is happening inside of you. Let's name it and identify it so that we can figure out what you need and find your community. And then social, how others perceive us. So with trans youth in particular, I think this is massive. This is where they spend a lot of time, is trying to get others to see them as who they truly are. So like, for example, if I was working with a trans youth in one of our support groups, and we were taking them all on a trip, and I had their legal name, which was their dead name, their birth name, right? And I had no clue what their dead name was because it's absolutely no reason for me to know this, right? And so I needed their legal name though for the plane ticket as we were taking them on this trip. And they were telling me that their grandparents only call them by their legal name and that the grandparents never use their chosen name. And I'm like thinking to myself, it's like your grandparents are forcing this version of you onto you, right? Instead of just seeing you as you truly are. And so with trans youth, they're constantly trying to figure out, what is it going to take for others to truly accept me, to truly see me? Does that make sense? And so with that, I think sometimes trans youth can kind of follow these very traditional scripts, right? Like they can be this almost like stereotypical boy, girl, in order to be seen as they are, because they're trying to avoid being misgendered. So again, I think that's where giving them some space and permission to be like, hey, like you can be a girl and do all of these things. You can be a boy and do all of these things. And this can be even more intense if you have a youth who's non-binary or gender expansive, because yes, it can be cool to create your own script, and it can be absolutely terrifying if you're 8 years old and you're like, I have no clue what this looks like, right? How do I navigate? How do I relate to people? And so just being that voice of like, hey, like, let's look at some videos, representation, things like that to help you find your footing so that you can do what feels right for you. And so again, all of these are working together to build that sense of euphoria, and we're trying to lessen incongruence or dysphoria, if you've heard that. So with incongruence or dysphoria, we have kind of these three main wheelhouses, right? So we have body, mind, social again. So again, we have body, which is I feel uncomfortable with my body, right? Like this is not my home. This is not how my body should look as I understand my internal world of gender, right? For some youth, this can be really, really intense. For others, they're like, like I'm pretty chill. Like my body's my body. Like it's doing what I need it to do. I really don't have this disconnect, feel like I was born in the wrong body. And then I've met some youth where it is just off the charts, incredibly high. So don't assume that they immediately have this disconnect of their body, right? And I think one thing that can be really powerful is showing diversity of the human bodies. Like, for example, I know a number of young trans guys who are like, my hips are too wide to be a man. And I'm like, there are some very curvy cisgender men on this planet. Like we only see like the Batman shouldered, super lean waisted type person. But I think just showing them different bodies and just how they all exist can be helpful for them. Mind dysphoria, so discomfort with how you experience emotions or thoughts. So for example, kind of the stereotypical of boys don't cry, or girls can't be aggressive or leaders or things like that, like whatever internalized messaging you have. A lot of times youth can just really take that to the next level if they're trying to figure out their home in their trans experience. And so helping them just give permission to be like, you can experience all of these vast emotions and have all of these thoughts. Like, let's not link one thing to gender. And I think all of these can be helpful for just students regardless of their gender journey. So if you have like, I'm sure y'all can think of some cisgender students who are struggling with each of these points, right? And so I think this can just be taken to help all students regardless of their gender identity. And then lastly, we have social dysphoria. So discomfort again with how others see us. So I need to wear a dress so that I'm seen as a girl. I was working with a young trans girl a while back and she used to fish, but said that she no longer fishes. And I was like, you know, why? Do you not have equipment? Do you not have access to water? What's happening? And she said, well, girls don't fish. And I was like, tell me more, right? Like I grew up in Mississippi where everyone's covered in fish guts left and right? Like everyone's off hunting on the weekends and stuff. And I was like, if you want to fish, right? Let's talk about this. And I mean, but I totally get it because her fear is that if she goes to fish, she'll be perceived as a boy and then she'll be misgendered, right? And as harmful as that can be, it's also like, do what brings you joy and passion and like lights you up. So let's find a balance and work on coping skills so that if you are misgendered, you're able to handle it and do the things you love, because we don't want you to be limiting and making yourself smaller. I want you to be expanding and like doing all the things that make your heart sing, right? So with types of transition or evolution, these are 3 large wheelhouses that can be used to help interrupt any sense of dysphoria or incongruence that a youth might be feeling. And you can do all of these at not all of them, but you can do a lot of them at the elementary school level. So for example, name, pronouns, and that social realm, this is where a lot of us are going to be living. So before I continue, I think it's important to know your lane, right? So if you are a school nurse, cool, might be helpful for you to know if a youth is taking puberty blockers or hormones or anything like that. But we don't need to be asking these questions, right? Again, like what knowledge do I really need versus what is curiosity? So I used to run our trans support group. I used to run our middle school support group where we have a lot of trans youth. Never once did I ask youth if they're taking hormones, if they're on puberty blockers, if they've had any surgeries, because it's none of my business. Like instead they would say, hey, I'm maybe about to start hormones. It's like, awesome. How are we feeling? Are we anxious? Are we excited? Like, what support do you need? Even then I took it into the social realm, because the last thing folks need is for me to be in charge of their medical care. It would end horribly for everyone involved. So my lane is that social world. And I'm sure that's where a lot of y'all are as well. So honoring youth's chosen name, chosen pronouns, helping them find clothes that are affirming. Underclothes, that could also be things like perfume or hair clips, hair ties, scrunchies. Like the possibilities are endless of what could just really make a youth feel super, super euphoric and happy. This could also be interest, like giving them permission to play with different toys. If they're playing a game with their friends, allowing them to enter this imaginary role of like, no, like you identify as a girl and you want to play the mom, cool, like you get to do that. Like just giving them permission to play and explore. And then binders or breast implants, this would be more so at the probably middle school, high school level. But if you have a youth just in your life who asks, binders are essentially really, really intense sports bras where they just flatten breast tissue to create the illusion of a more masculine chest. Breast implants, if you just wear like any sort of training bra, regular bra, you can just get these like foam inserts, silicone inserts that you just put into the bra to create the illusion of a more fuller chest. Totally safe to use, but it can be a very powerful tool to help youth. And then lastly, we have legal, so that's name change, gender markers, all of these different things. And with any school, we always encourage like folks to look at what is actually like a legal document versus just a student ID or a roster, right? And looking at how can we honor youth's chosen names so that we're lessening any misgendering and lessening any sense of incongruence or dysphoria. Okay, so that was a lot of information. So again, we have our physical body, we have our internal world, and now we have gender expression. So how do I dress my body? Because we're not allowed to run around in our birthday suits, right? That would be quite scandalous. So with gender expression, this is everything from hair, makeup, clothes, interests, like everything in our culture is gendered in one way or another. I love Target probably way too much. It's really bad. They're always trying to get me to get one of their credit cards. I'm like, get away from me. But if you go to Target, right, like I love their toy section because they have like black, gray, and then they have neon pink, purple, and then Target has this kind of like retro toy wooden section where I'm like, cool, we'll just take the little stick and wheel and like run down the street. Like, but toys, clothes, everything is gendered, right? And with gender expression, I think this is one of the most overlooked things because I think it's everywhere and nowhere, right? So what I mean by that is everyone in this room, right, has a gender expression, whether we're aware of it or not. And I can look at each one of you and based off of your gender expression, assume that I know what your gender identity is, right? So I can look at you and say like, oh, you have long hair, you're wearing a dress, you're wearing makeup, must be a woman, therefore must use she, her pronouns. But I have no clue, right? Because I didn't ask. So one of the most powerful things we can do just right out of the gate is to create that pause by asking, hey, what are your pronouns? Or I share my pronouns, or I have a sign in my office or an announcement on my dry erase board in my classroom, but anything to just create this dialogue, this conversation where I'm trying to just honor my students and give space for things to expand. If you're working with like tiny humans, is there a way you can even make it a game? So we start the day with this bizarre pronoun game because you're a ridiculously creative teacher and you came up with a way to ask youth their pronouns in a fun and engaging way where they can move and get the wigglies out, and then we can start the day and be more grounded, right? That could also be totally chaotic. Please let me know how it goes if you create such a game. But regardless of someone's gender identity, if their gender expression is not fitting into the kind of norm or the expectations of their community, they're going to experience really high rates of bullying or harassment. I'm sure y'all see this in your school where you have that student who maybe can't afford the North Face jacket. And so they get a lot of bullying for that, or their hair is a different color or not the right texture or whatever it is. Like students can find the tiniest, biggest thing to zero in on, but finding ways to just create this diversity, this acceptance of like, hey, let's stop like pressuring all of us to dress and present in a certain way. Let's give permission for students to present in a whole variety of ways. That's just going to help every single person, regardless of their sexual or gender identity. And then lastly, with gender expression, folks who identify as cisgender men or masculine folks and they present in a more feminine way are going to experience very, very high rates of bullying and harassment. So like, again, for me, myself, and I, when I was growing up in the early 90s, it was like Spice Girl era, right? Like girl power, like Scary Spice all the way. So this was like a very convenient time because I was assumed to be a girl, but I was naturally interested in masculine things. Like I always had Power Rangers. I was running around shirtless playing football. Like I was labeled a tomboy, right? So I'm seen as a young girl who's empowered because I like masculine things. But if we switch things and let's say I was born a boy, assumed to be a boy, but I wanted to be a cheerleader more than anything, I would not have gotten praise and high fives and celebration, right? And I think that very much is true to this day of our culture, whether we like to admit it or not, does not like or really celebrate feminine things. We like it when feminine folks do masculine things, but not when masculine folks do feminine things, right? So like there's a young trans guy I know who's ridiculously talented with makeup. Like he could easily be one of the on those competition shows because he can do like the animal prints and all of that, but he never wears makeup when he's out and about because one, he knows he'll probably be misgendered, and two, he's like, guys don't wear makeup, right? And so it's like, even then, like as a trans youth, like he has this internalized almost like misogyny of like, no, like this aspect of me is bad and I can only engage in it in certain moments. So I think this is really where we have to start looking at our own biases of if you have a student who we're reading is to be a boy, but loves to wear princess dresses, like just loves it, makes his heart sing. It's like, okay, can I give this child space to just exist and present in this way? And it's like, yes, you are Elsa. Let's sing Frozen and dance it out and like tell me about your dress. Like, let's just like run with it, right? Or I was talking to an elementary student, or not elementary, an elementary teacher, and she said that she has a young boy who loves to read in this giant dollhouse that they have in the classroom. Like he just feels very safe in it and just loves this like universe that he's created in this dollhouse. And that students were really making fun of him. And she was like, well, what do I do? And I was like, well, how would you handle this if there was any other instance of bullying? And she was like, oh, well, I would interrupt and lean in and use this as a teachable moment and tell the students to like back off and let this kid play in the dollhouse. It's like, you just done, like that's it, right? You've just answered your own question, right? And I think like we just overthink things, but giving that kid permission to like, you can be a boy and play with dolls, you can be a girl and play with Hot Wheels. Like, let's just interrupt these biases that we have and let's start removing gender from all of these daily languages, because at the end of the day, it probably just doesn't matter that you're a person in a male body and you want to play with dolls. Like, just go for it. And then lastly, trans girls, trans women have the highest rates of violence, particularly if we bring in race and class. So Black trans women, the rates of violence and harassment are off the chart. The life expectancy of a Black trans woman, for example, is around 30 years old, as far as like the research has shown with that. And that's, again, like multiple systems are coming together, because with this, right, like I'm kind of moving up and down that sort of privilege hierarchy. So again, for me, myself and I'm white, I'm able-bodied, I'm educated, I'm non-binary, part of the trans community, but I present in a masculine way. I can sort of adapt my gender expression depending on my environment to make myself feel safer. So I'm sort of in a weird way moving up that privilege hierarchy, versus when I talk to young trans women, particularly young trans women of color, now I'm moving down and I'm having these multiple isms come at my body to really impact my lived experience and how I'm navigating the world. So a lot of times when I go to schools, as we visit like gender sexuality alliances, things like that, when I visit schools, I see a lot of white students, even in schools that dominantly serve Black and brown students, because again, I have that privilege and that protection to say, this is how I identify, right? And I see a lot of particularly white trans students or white non-binary but masculine presenting students. Because again, is it safer for me to say this versus if I'm a young brown trans girl, what's the risk of me saying like, hey, this is who I am, this is how I identify? Does all of this make sense? Okay. Sometimes I feel like I'm just rambling and I'm literally feel like I'm talking to myself. So just want to make sure, checking in. So we get asked a lot kind of how young is too young. And the research shows that between 3 to 4 years old, youth have a pretty solid understanding of who they are. Like, this is my gender, right? So if you have a 3-year-old that can whip out a PowerPoint presentation and name all of this, they should probably skip K through 12 and just go to college and become a president, right? Like, let's just be honest. So if you are working with tiny humans, right, like at the elementary level, what this is going to look like is exploration, is play, is I'm using language and names and different things like that to try to communicate. So for example, when I was like around this age, my birth name is Helen, and I would run up to my mom and my mom would say, hey, Helen, like, come here. And I'm like, no, I'm Max. And she'd be like, okay, what's up, Max? And I'd be Max for a couple of weeks and then I'd go back to Helen. And she was just like, alrighty, child, just go play. Like, you make me sleepy. but she just gave me this space to be. Like, there was no judgment. She had no clue what this was. She thought I was just being a kid. And she just gave me permission to play and explore any part of myself that I wanted to. There was no judgment. And I look back now on that time and I'm like, that is a gift that so few youth have, especially like early 90s, where this language was not this common thing, right? And it really wasn't until I got into older elementary school that my peers and teachers were kind of this voice of being like, no, this isn't okay. And you need to present and express yourself in this way. And I was like, oh, okay, like, let me like kind of button this down and I'll be what y'all want me to be. And we'll just kind of put Max away for a while. But when I see teachers that give students the space to just play and be, it's like you're going to create a culture where students, again, regardless of their gender identity, are just able to explore. And I think that's so, so key, especially for students who, especially if they're male bodied and expected to present in this way, like how powerful to be like, no, like, let's talk about our emotions. Let's play and learn how to be nurturers and caretakers. Because it's also interesting in the research is that even as babies, the language that is used for us is very different. So for male babies, it's a lot of like verbs and actions, like we're in a Nike commercial, right? And then for female babies, we use language around consent and emotions and like, oh, I'm going to touch you now. And what are you feeling? Like, even as babies, it's kind of this like emotional intelligence is already starting. So we're sort of putting folks on these two different paths. And then there's just this massive gap because a lot of like masculine students aren't given that language of emotions and let's label what's happening and all of this. So I think just once we start breaking these up, we're allowing so much expansion for all students. And you could see higher rates of young girls going into math and science and young boys going into, I don't know, like counseling or things like that. Like we're just kind of creating this divide. And then we have our non-binary gender expansive students. They can just run around in circles and do all 20 things at once, right? Like the possibilities are endless. Are there any questions on this slide? I just want to pause. I'm trying to be mindful of time. And check the chat too. Yes, Jeff. Oh, you raised your hand. That's so formal. I love it.
I was wondering, because one thing that I've dealt with and maybe other teachers have as well is being in an elementary school where students might feel comfortable expressing themselves at school in a way that they're not comfortable at home.
Yes.
That maybe have anxiety or concern about, I want to be identifying this way, but I don't want mom to know about it. I don't know if, I'm guessing that, I don't know how common that is, or if you had thoughts on that you could share.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like navigating guardians, parents, the adults in youth's lives, like that's the question, right? And I'm still figuring that out. So one of the resources that I shared with y'all, it's called like Connecting with Families, something like that. And I created it alongside an organization called He, She, Ze, and We. And I can type that out. And He, She, Ze, and We is a parent family support group for families that have trans, non-binary, gender expansive students in their families. And so what they do is provide education, right? So we created this document that's kind of like a script, for lack of a better word, just to help out some of those moments and just to try to facilitate like, okay, how would I handle this, right? So I think there's multiple pieces. So I think first, knowing what are the policies and procedures to protect you and have your back as an employee, right? So going to your supervisor, your principal, all of these things, and knowing that county, yep, Cindy's hand is raised. So knowing all of those policies so that you feel backed as a employee, because I think there's nothing worse than feeling like, wait, am I risking my job, right, by honoring this student and trying to give them a space to affirm? So just creating that plan. I think the younger the youth, the more you kind of have to make certain decisions, just because the youth might not have the language to navigate all of these things. But just kind of asking that youth, be like, okay, cool. So you said that you feel anxious to dress this way when you're home and you feel like your mom isn't supported. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And maybe we bring in our counseling staff and we just have a chat, right? But regardless, when you're in my classroom, you can totally dress in this way and you can play. And what name do you want me to call you? Oh, cool. What's up, Jamie? Like, and I'm affirming this youth, right? And I'm de-escalating, I'm giving them permission, all of these little things. And if parents, guardians find out and they're like, hey, like, I don't like this, it's like, okay, cool. How about we have that conversation with our counseling team and bring our principal involved, and we can just explain why we're doing this. We're not trying to lie to you. We're not trying to deceive. We're just trying to honor your kiddo, because we know the best practices, and the best practices are for us to honor your youth. Cindy, is there anything you'd like to add? I can see your hand.
First, I lowered my hand and then I started talking. So thank you, DeHaven. And Jeff, thank you for the question. I think it's very important and relevant. And Marcy put in the chat as well, struggling with, how do we balance at home and school? And the policy is pretty very clear on this. And DeHaven, I think you're exactly right. Right now, we're honoring and affirming in class. And it may be fluid in class and we go along with that. But really here, and I'm going to read from the policy, it says, some gender expansive students have not yet talked to their parents about their gender identity or do not want their parents to know about their gender expansive status based on safety concerns or fear about lack of acceptance. And so the first conversation is case by case. It's talking with the child in class, it's talking with us, it's talking with the counselors. And then we'll talk about that on a case-by-case basis, but the policy is very clear that, we honor pronouns, names, that fluidity in school, and involve the families when the child is ready and when we have that conversation. So
Yeah.
Does that help, Jeff? Okay, and I think we have some other teachers who have children in their class that are exploring evolving. That was the word you used, DeHaven, when I asked about this. The word is like when they're evolving. So, all right, I'm gonna put my hand down and let it go back to DeHaven.
Bethany, do you have a question, a comment?
In 2012, I had a student come from another school, and I think there was a lot of bullying. And so when we got there, she sat with admin, and then she changed her pronouns. She said, I want to be called he, I'm a he. And he hadn't shared with his parents at that point, living with grandparents. And so, it was 10 years ago, so we were still trying to navigate it and figure that out. The grandparents were fully on board, and he said, I left this last school because I was bullied. I tried to identify as a girl, but I was still called gay. I was still called a he. Like, I was made fun of even when I tried to identify as a girl. So I think he was trying to live as a she, and it just got really bad. And I know there's lots of stories, and I think, Marcy, your question is fantastic. I'd like to know that as well. And Cindy, your answer worked for me too, to know. Just a little anecdotal.
No, thank you. And Marcy, to your question, I'm skimming it neurodivergent, so bear with me, as sometimes reading things is not my wheelhouse. But I think, again, it goes back to finding this balance of like, okay, this is my personal boundaries, and how do I honor the student, right? So finding clothes, for example, like maybe could not be a resource that y'all have. But if you have like costumes in your classroom, like, cool, I'm gonna let the student explore and play and dress with these costumes in a way that feels good for them. And I think if parents aren't on board, again, it's the best practices are just super, super clear on the power of affirming. And like, I helped myself and a bunch of other organizations help the VDOE write the trans model guidelines. And one question we get asked a lot is like, well, are you lying to parents? Are you lying to guardians? Like, the research is also incredibly clear that when school and home are on board, we're going to see youth thrive. Like, we are going to see them rock and roll. And if one environment isn't, I always think of it like a balancing act, because I've worked with middle schoolers in particular where both home and school were bad. And that's when I was like, okay, how do I see your face next week, right? Because you're feeling so hopeless, so depressed, so anxious because your whole universe is not okay. But the youth that were able to say, you know what, home isn't great, but I can go to Miss Jones, and like Miss Jones catches me and affirms me every single day. And I can have lunch in her classroom, and my chosen name is honored, and I can play and explore and do all these things. So there's at least a moment for me to catch my breath. And I think that's what schools can offer, or vice versa. If school isn't great, can home be that space where youth can just like collapse and just be their full authentic selves? And I see your hands up. So yes, please.
Yeah, I love all people, and I will affirm every student, every single day. And I'm being very vulnerable when I just want to say I just have a big boundary between affirmation and encouragement that I'm finding. I just am so comfortable with affirmation.
Yeah.
I'm finding there begins to be a blur for me with encouragement, and that makes me very uncomfortable as a parent. And because I have boundaries for my family, and I would want to know what's going on with my children. And the same way I wouldn't encourage mask wearing or not wearing, I'm just finding this, religion, not religion, this boundary, and what exactly does affirmation look like versus encouragement.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I really appreciate your vulnerability. And I think you bring up a great point, right? So when I work with students, right, I don't like, I'll use the example. My partner, she has a 4-year-old cousin, right? Super cute kid, loves trucks, loves like throwing them across the room, like just banging on him, right? So like I was playing with him, and we're playing with like all of his mini trucks, and he just happened to also pick up a doll and started like playing with it. I was like, oh, cool. Like, what's your doll's name? Do. I'm not encouraging him. I'm not being like, hey, like, hold this doll, like, play with this doll, right? I'm kind of forcing you into this box. But like, if he naturally picks it up, it's like, oh, cool. Tell me about your doll. Do you want to put the doll on the Hot Wheel? And then what happens, right? Like, tell me like what's happening in your brain. So to me, affirmation is I'm following the youth's lead and just kind of seeing where are they going, versus to me encouragement, like I've also seen it almost where it's like folks are sort of forcing like boys to play with dolls or girls to play with Hot Wheels. It's like, let's just like see where that natural interest is, but I'm just giving the space and the permission to let youth explore like what they're sort of naturally curious about. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I think a lot like on the middle school level too, where I'm seeing a trend of like most of the murals in the building being pro, like, transgender, or and I'm my concern is in a time where children are growing, if we're encouraging, does this become a popular thing versus is this honoring my true self? And that's where my struggle is right now.
Yeah, no, that's so real. I mean, I won't lie, like I've had that moment looking at some middle schoolers, because middle school, right, it's that interesting age where I pick an identity and my whole being is that identity, like I'm nothing else. It's like, hey friends, like, let's expand ourselves. So again, for me, it's just finding ways to not push back, but just have them question and be like, okay, cool, like you're saying your whole world is LGBTQI, like do you have other interests, do you have other things? And we're just, again, I'm just trying to naturally push them to always expand and question, is this right? Is this my truth? What feels like most at home for me? Because that's my goal, right? I just want youth to be their full selves. And that's the mission of Side by Side. And however we can do that, right? Like, I want to follow their lead, follow their voice. Because I'm a firm believer that youth have a very like deep understanding of who they are, and developmentally, right? Sometimes they can use some assistance, right? Because I think sometimes our brains can sort of melt out of our ears during certain moments of adolescence. So just helping find a balance. Yeah. But thank you so much for your voice and your questions. Really appreciate it.
And just to follow it, like I support all people in their beliefs. And I have family members that are in same gender relationships. And I just wanted to voice my vulnerability because I know how confusing middle school can be. And I blocked it out. And these situations in my own head and understand what it looks like as an educator and supporter, and have families be comfortable with our roles also as, you know, advocates for children. So
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to keep on swimming, just trying to be mindful of time. Loving this conversation. Y'all are very smart. Y'all are on it. I'm sweating in a good way. Like, it's just like, ooh, okay, cool. Like, we're engaging. All right. So just to finish up this section, so we have sexual orientation, right? So for sexual orientation, we want to break it up from orientation and desire, right? So I was always taught, like, don't have sex until you're married or in love or all of these things. And I think the intent, right, is I want you to understand that this is a big thing. Don't just jump into it. I want you to have a connection with someone. All great stuff, all great intentions. Also, what it does is it can teach us that sex and intimacy are one and the same thing. And probably the biggest identity I'm seeing pop up, especially around the middle school age, is language around being asexual or aromantic. So asexual is someone who does not experience sexual desire as our society expects. This could be someone who absolutely does not want to do any sort of sexual activity, or it could be like it's more fluid. I need a deeper connection with someone. Just kind of depends what's happening. So it's absolutely a spectrum. Same with aromantic. Aro youth is someone who does not experience romantic desires, things like that. So just really important to break these two things up and give permission for youth. With sexual orientation and romantic desire, these start popping up more like that later elementary, middle school time, versus gender identity is really popping up around elementary level. But just wanted to name all of this. And then allosexual or alloromantic is someone who experiences sexual and or romantic desire as society expects. I was just checking for questions. So I'm gonna keep on swimming, but just to finish up this section, if you have a youth who comes out as asexual, aromantic, I think it can be really impactful to just, again, give them permission and be like, cool, you're not broken. You don't need to meet the right person. This is a valid experience and you're fine to be exactly who you are. A lot of times, especially parents or adults who have youth who come out as ace or aro, they're like, I think there's anxiety of like, oh, I don't want my kid to be alone. Are they going to have any sort of like deeper relationship or anything like that? And yes to all of it. Like students who identify within the ace community can have like deep, impactful, meaningful relationships. It just might look different. And so just giving them permission. But I have some very, very dear friends who identify within the ace aro umbrellas, and they said that they kind of forced themselves into relationships and just different situations where they thought that they just had to kind of suck it up. And like, if they just sort of did these physical things, then finally something would click and they'd have these feelings. And they said that all they feel like they did was just traumatize themselves and violate themselves, because this is not how they connect with folks. And so again, I think just that power of giving youth the language and the permission to be like, cool, so maybe for you, you need to have a deep understanding, connection, whether that's intellectual, spiritual, emotional, before you can even think to kiss someone. Cool. Or maybe you don't want to kiss anyone at all. Neat. But you want to have those long romantic chats and cuddles or whatever. So it just, again, giving all that different visibility can be so powerful. And yeah, I see that.
DeHaven, I want to jump in here just because this is going a little deeper than, I mean, this is more for adults here. This conversation here, we would strictly adhere to our family life curriculum.
Gotcha.
And where that is. And so I think that's good information for us as adults to be aware of, but we would not be talking about any of that at elementary. We have to really follow family life. We actually have an approach that we're going to do for family life here is that we're going to continue on Zoom so that children can log in and listen to the family life section that they identify with. So that's one of the wonderful things that has come out of Zoom that we learned. They're like, hey, this will be great and safe for all children. As we go forward. So I just wanted to put that out here. I really appreciate you sharing that, but that is not what we'll be talking about.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And so just finishing up this section, this is kind of the these lines are sort of what society expects, right? It's just kind of this linear fashion of how we'll identify, express, love, connect with folks, all of that. And the reality is this. So I'm sure even in this Zoom room, the diversity is probably all over the place of how we identify our bodies, how we love, if we connect with folks in that way, how we express ourselves and all of that. And so our culture erases that diversity, and it's this erasure that triggers so much of the mental health struggles that LGBTQ youth experience. So a lot of times when youth see, or not youth, when folks see the statistics around LGBTQ youth, particularly trans youth, I think sometimes people will think, oh, it's because they identify, and it's like, no, it's they come out and then are treated as such. And so that erasure can just cause those rates of suicidality, self-harm, depression, all of those different things. Time is absolutely not my friend today, y'all. I apologize. So with LGBTQ, unfortunately, a lot of times if you got on like Instagram, for example, you're going to see me. You're going to see white, poofy hair and all of this. And what that does is it creates this whitewashing, this erasure of all of the diversity that exists within this massive LGBTQ community. So it's super important to, for example, if you're going to ask pronouns, don't ask someone their pronouns because you think they identify as part of the community, right? I'm asking everyone their pronouns because I can be a person of color and identify. I can be in a rural community and identify. I can be rich, able-bodied, religious, spiritual, all of these different elements come together and exist within the LGBTQ community. But what we see time and again is this very limited representation and narrow version of what it means to be LGBTQ. So if you are, for example, teaching a class or you have story time with your students, what are the books that you're using? What are the different ways that you can bring in a more intersectional lens so that all students can see themselves and be like, oh, cool, like that's what my family looks like. Or I didn't know that I could identify or have these words. And you're just, again, creating representation, because I think when you see yourself and your story everywhere, you miss the power of seeing someone who looks like you and shares your story and shares your identity. It's like, oh, wow, like I can be that thing. Like I was working with a young trans girl who wants to be a chemist. And she was like, I can't be a chemist because I'm a trans girl. It's like, no, yes, you can. Please go do chemistry, like, and teach me, because I flunked out of VCU chemistry epically. But again, she hadn't seen it, so she didn't know it was a possibility. So with 3 risk factors, I'm just going to go through this pretty quickly so that we can talk about the policy. These are the 3 main wheelhouses that we see of youth being at risk for mental health struggles. So with family rejection, this could be anything from a youth coming out, this would be more at the older school level, but youth coming out and then parents being like, you're no longer welcome in my home, or I'm going to make home life so uncomfortable that you feel like you need to leave. In one survey that was done, it said that only 27% of trans youth said that their families were affirming or supportive, right? 27%, like that's so small, right? And other pieces of family rejection could look like, we have family coming over, so you need to dress in this way, or I'm going to call you by your old name, your birth name, your old pronouns, and you need to kind of hide these pieces. So I think sometimes the intent is I'm trying to protect my kiddo, but what the youth is hearing and seeing is, oh, I need to hide these pieces of me and I can't just be me, right? I was working with a mom who's an incredible advocate, and her youth came out as trans around middle school. And she said that before he came out, he was failing school. He would come home, go straight to his room, like absolutely disengaged from every level of the family. And then he came out and everyone started honoring his name, his pronouns. And it was like a light turned on. And all of a sudden he was acing school. He was cooking dinner. He was watching movies with the family. Like he was completely engaged. I just remember her saying, like, I don't care how my kid identifies. I just want my kid. Like I want my child back. And now by me saying, hey, John, I'm seeing my child again and all of his wackiness and like done. So I always think about that story when working with families and just being like, cool, sometimes like it just can be that initial like, no, I'm not okay. But through education, through support, and a space for parents and families to catch up, grieve, have all these complex emotions, then they're able to see like, oh, my kid is still my kid. They're just seeing themselves in this way. Cool. what does my kiddo need? Like, let's rock and roll. So with isolation, the biggest thing with this one for me is concealment of identity. So I think first, like, youth can register that, oh, I'm different than my peers, right? I have these feelings, I'm seeing myself in this different way. Like, that doesn't feel great. I feel like disconnected from my group. But then if there's a lot of like, that's so gay or no homo or pressure to exist and express myself in a certain way, now I need to hide this piece of myself. And that concealment can be absolutely exhausting and soul sucking for youth. And it's like, if you, like, let's say like you are trying to talk about your life and you're not able to talk about your interests, you're not able to talk about your significant others, your children, like, how much of yourself can you really share with someone, right? If you're just being like, I'm just not going to name anything that might clue someone that I feel this way or identify in this way, right? So again, being intentional with representation in your classroom, I think, can help give youth that permission. And then also interrupting in real time any sort of bullying or homophobic, transphobic language just floating around, and trying to figure out ways to create a culture where youth can just be. And so lastly, with this section, hostile school environments, we really look at like that school setting. So GLSEN is an incredible organization that does a lot of research on the lived experiences of LGBTQ youth at K through 12 levels. And so what's seen is that even though the vast majority of elementary students get some sort of dialogue, workshop, classroom setting on diversity, there's still incredibly high rates of bullying, right? So like, what's happening that we're talking about these things, but there's something missing in reality where students are still feeling like, oh, I need to exist in this way and perform in this way so that I'm in line with what my community expects, right? And so the rates of youth kind of exploring and being like more gender expansive and not following traditional gender norms, I think that's just going to increase as gender is literally being reconstructed in real time, right? Like Gen Z's understanding of gender is so different than millennials, than Gen X, and it's just changing so quickly. And I think just watching that cultural change is one, it's going to be really fascinating, but also just interrupting any sort of that's so gay or homophobic remarks so that students see like, hey, this isn't acceptable. And I'm being that real life example for my students as the adult in this space. Okay, protective factors, ending on a happy note. So before we jump into the activity, what I want y'all to think about is, what biases do you have, right? We all have them, whether we like to admit them or not. We're human beings. We've all been taught certain scripts, how to live, how to exist. So we all have biases. Just naming them and being like, oh, cool. All right. I got a little squirmy there. I'm going to name that. We're going to continue our educational journey, right? So the second big thing is with this activity, thinking about curiosity. So the older I get, the more pressure I feel to not be a curious person who wants to just learn and expand, which makes me incredibly sad. I think a lot of times with youth, I see like us kind of adulting them. And instead it's like, can I just meet you with curiosity and try to enter your wonderful, bizarre world and just engage with you in that way and enter your level. And then with lastly, how can we be proactive? So what are things that we can do, whether that's a lesson plan as a school community, how can we engage our students to just create this more inclusive environment? So this is the massive VDOE policy trans guidelines, right? So each of these 8 points is from the lived experiences of trans students at the K through 12 level, saying this is what I need in order to learn the joys of calculus or to actually like absorb history, right? And just show up and pass school. So what we're gonna do is break y'all up into breakout groups for, God, time is not my friend, for like 5-6 minutes. And I want
we'll do 10 minutes. We'll do 10 minutes.
Cool.
Yeah.
And just read through Nicole's story. There's some objectives at each point, but just think of in Nicole's day, what are things we can do to affirm and things to interrupt any sort of bullying or things that might make her experience more hostile? How can we just support Nicole so that she can show up and like rock out school and be like a full human? So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen because I was just talking for so long, y'all. Y'all are gonna go into breakout rooms.
I will put the link to Nicole's story in the chat for everybody. It's also linked in the materials, but I thought it might be easier to have there. Brad's going to open up breakout rooms. We thought the way to have this conversation would be with your PLC teams or your teams that you normally work with. And so we'll take 10 minutes to do that.
Yeah, and before I open those up, that was our attempt, right, to kind of put that together. So, but if you, like, for example, if you are an ESOL teacher and you are doing something with one grade level and you want to join that grade level, that's fine. So again, this is our attempt, but if you see a different PLC on here that you would like to join, that's also okay. So I'm going to go ahead and open those now.
And Brad, when I get back, remind me to turn the recording back on. So I don't want to record this part. Thank you.
And if anybody needs help getting into a room, just let me know. I know sometimes with some of the updates and Zoom, it's a little tricky, so I'm more than happy to help.
Hey Brad, hey Cindy.
Hey Yvette.
I just joined in because our DPLC just concluded.
Okay. Yeah, no, that works. It's good to see you, Yvette. So right now we're going to go into breakout rooms. If you see that up there, you can join the pre-K one, kind of read through this story and talk with the team. But if you need help getting into that breakout room, I can help.
All the EC pre-K were in the DPLC, so I'm not
okay.
sure that would be helpful.
That's okay. That's okay. So if there's another one that you would want to join, there's some other breakout rooms.
I can do the special ed one. Thank you.
That would work. Thanks, Yvette. And I can help too, like Nancy, Kelly, Angie, it might still be popping up, but Nancy, did you want to join the TA one or did you want to join the kindergarten one?
Angie, ¿quieres que te mueva?
Sorry, Nancy, it looks like it might be on mute if you, it's okay.
Okay, sorry.
It's
I'll
okay.
join the TA one.
The TA one, okay, let me go ahead
Yeah.
and get you in there. You should see something pop up on your screen that says join.
Yeah.
You see that?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay,
Thanks.
all right. Great to see you, Nancy. And then Doug and Kristen too, just let me know. Doug, would you want to join the teaching assistant one or is there a grade level you'd want to join?
Or the counselors piece?
Or the counselor? Yeah.
Well, they're all together though. It's a little different.
Right,
I
right.
wonder if Providence and Doug want to be some, I don't know.
And hey, Hannah, how are you?
Hi,
Is
sorry
you-
to interrupt. I cannot access the document. I don't think that Cindy has added me to the all staff one. So if you could make it so I could see that, because we are not able, no one on my team could share their screen. We don't have the ability to share screen.
All right, I just enabled share screen, so that should work for now. And then we'll, sorry about that, Hannah. Yeah.
No, it's okay.
Oh.
Can I also, Brad, could I send you, Jordan Gebhardt also
Yep.
would like to be on the,
Yeah, shoot me those names and we'll get that fixed today.
Yeah, we'll get it added. I'll add them.
I want to make sure I'm spelling her last name correctly. Okay.
All right, Doug, where you want to go?
Those are the emails, Brad.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank
Yes,
you.
Thank you. All right, see you on a bit.
All right. So I did not see the time, unfortunately, when I opened those breakout rooms. Was that like, when should I close the
Estimate.
breakout rooms?
guesstimate. I like that word, guesstimate.
Yeah. Sometimes I do that. Yeah.
Yeah, we can give folks, I feel like they just started early.
Thank you, DeHaven. That's very nice. I don't know if we introduced, I'm one of the assistant principals, Rosaura.
Oh, cool. Cool.
Sorry about that.
No worries at all.
Yeah.
No, thank you so much. Like, yeah, just again, feel so grateful for this. And how are you feeling? I just want to check in. I know that's a lot of
Oh, I feel good. Yeah,
good.
I'm always like, I feel like sometimes with the online trainings, like
hard to gauge.
I'm like, oh, that isn't good. And then I get really good feedback or vice versa. And I'm like,
it's just hard to gauge the faces,
That's right.
Topics, yeah.
Because so much of like this work to me is like relationship building.
Correct.
And just creating a vibe where folks feel comfortable just being like, hey, like I am being super vulnerable right now and I don't want to get yelled at by my peers when this is done. And it's like, yeah, like I totally get that. But I'm able to like get the vibe a little bit more and kind of adapt as I go. So I've had a harder time with that.
It's really hard. No, yeah, I think we all feel the same way. That's one of the things, like when we're doing our big staff meetings, I think it's so hard to gauge. I think, for whatever it's worth from our perspective, since we're with this staff and we do a lot of Zoom, I feel like it's being received really well. I feel like the staff is really appreciating it. Like
I've been checking faces.
I can see a lot of head nods and smiles and comment, so, for whatever that's worth.
Cool.
And I appreciate. Yeah, and I appreciated how you answered to Marcy, because she put herself out there to be vulnerable, and I privately thank her for putting herself out there and being vulnerable, and that we're all learning. I learn a lot of things right now that I didn't know, like for example, we have a child in kindergarten that right now he puts dresses on, and little bows. And he's so cute though. And then I don't know how to refer. My granddaughter's in the same class, and she says, well, first she said he's a half boy, half girl. And then she says, no, he wants he wants to be called a she. And I have a hard time referring to the child. Do I just say she? Do I say he? Do I say they? Them? Because I don't want to insult anybody. I think my granddaughter knows more about Seth than I do, but yeah, because they're best friends. They go play dates together. But it's like, how do you refer without offending? I think that's what I'm having, and be a role model for teaching other kids how to refer to them. And I mean, how do you do when they're only 5-year-olds and they don't know yet? They're just exploring, their identity.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think like just asking. Like, and I know that can feel so weird. It's like I'm asking a 5-year-old, but it could just be something so simple, like, hey, like, I know you by this name. Is there another name you want me to call you? It's like, oh yeah, like I want, like, just, but again, I think our brains, especially as adults, I know for myself, like just overanalyze everything. Kids, like, God bless elementary students, like they'll just take things at face value, like I was working with one teacher, and I think she taught like 4th grade, 3rd, something like that. And she's a woman, but presents in a very masculine way. And she said she had a student ask if she was a man because she has short hair. And she just freaked out, didn't know how to respond, called me panicking. And I was like, well, do you identify as a man? And she's like, well, no, I'm a woman. I was like, just say that. Like, just say that you're a woman with short hair. And she did the next day. And the student was like, okay, and just ran off. And it wasn't like, he was like, oh, cool. I didn't know that you could be a woman with short hair, because all the women in the student's life had really long hair.
Yeah, right. Overanalyze.
Oh,
that's for a lot of things. Like we sexualize, sometimes
like
interactions, and I said,
so much of what students do at this age, like they're just like, bodies are weird. They're like, worlds are weird. Like they're just playing and exploring. But when we put fear and shame and charge everything up, I think that's when we start having issues, versus just being like, cool, like you're wearing your princess dress, neat.
That's wonderful.
Like just
That's good.
de-escalating everything. I think that alone can be so powerful for you.
That's the best message we can give. De-escalate everything. Don't make it more than it is. I like that. We need that for everything in our lives, to be honest.
Truly, I mean, adults just we overcomplicate so much. Like we just need to let our brains go to sleep for a few days and just
You're so right. That was, yeah, you're so right. Well, you make me feel better. I always been kind of tomboy, and I remember getting short hair. I remember kids asking, "Are you a boy or a girl?" You know what I mean?
Yeah, same. And it's just like,
"Are you a boy or a girl?" Or asking my brothers, "Is that a boy or a girl?" You know, I mean, like whispering. I said, "Well, I'm a girl with a lot of tomboy, a lot of male things that I still do. I mean, still do."
All right, so 11, sorry, I'm just gonna.
That's okay.
How much time do you feel like you need at the end? I know we told staff.
I know,
like, we wrap up around
we
11.
should probably, can you put like a message and be like, hey, like one more minute, wrap up, and then we'll bring folks back.
Do you need about like 10 minutes at the end to kind of wrap things up, or is that kind of straight? I know that's fast.
Not my friend. I can just like rush through stuff. And again, like there's so much in the resources. So I can just do like a quick summary of things.
Yeah. And I don't, and if for whatever it's worth, I don't want you to feel like you have to rush. So if you need just to kind of focus in on one thing or I mean, we trust you. And then like you said, if there's resources, these are things, this is not like a one and done for us. We'll circle back to this. We'll have conversations. We'll be in PLCs. We'll put this out. And so, if that's helpful as you're kind of
very thank you. Because I want to give folks at least a chance, like a couple of folks, to just share what they talked about.
Okay. I'll put a message in the rooms that just say like, we're going to be wrapping up in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Or 1 minute. Yeah. Thanks.
I'm usually not this off with time. I don't know.
No, it was good though. So don't,
All right. It was good. I learned a lot. Cool. Yeah. No, it's been good. Golly, I was going to jump in kindergarten. I don't even see them in the list. What is going on? I don't know why. Let me see. No, they're here. There you go. We just have about how many seconds? Not many, correct?
I just sent the message and then I'll hit the close button. Then I'll have about 60 seconds to come back into the main room.
Awesome.
Thank you, Brad.
Cool.
All right. Going there.
So are folks teaching after this?
They're doing, so it's a non-student day. So right after this, it'll be like, they're going to get a lunch break in, and then they're going to go back to their kind of the breakout room teams. They're going to go back to those teams and talk about, our mid-year data. I'm sure they'll continue some of these conversations, that whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a teacher work day. So no students today.
Gotcha.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close room. So people should be coming back in.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. And then we'll have about 60 seconds. I don't know if you can see it on your end, but.
Yeah, I can see the little window.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Very much appreciate your help with the.
Of course.
Breakout room. I think I just like when I pull it up, I see so many names and I'm like, where do I put everyone? Like, I don't overthinking it, right? Just there's a theme here.
Exactly. Yeah, we have found when it's a staff, it's nice to have 3 people to kind of help organize and manage all of those pieces. Yeah.
That's real. Adulting's hard, y'all. Y'all know those insurance commercials where it's like, I think it's Progressive or something, where it's like, we can't stop you from becoming your parents, but we'll try. And like, I love it. I think about those all the time lately. Like there was the other day, I was just like standing in my living room looking out the window. And I was like, this is what dads do. Like, why am I just standing here like watching? Like, there's nothing happening. So weird. I'm just gonna hope other people do that as well.
All right, everybody's back from breakout rooms.
Cool.
All right, so DeHaven, thank you so much for being part of this conversation today and getting us started thinking on how we wrap around and embrace each and every child and each and every staff member at Mountain View Elementary.
Yeah,
That's our
absolutely.
guiding principle. We want everyone to thrive. And so taking some time to examine where we are personally, our own biases, how we meet students with curiosity and affirmation and acceptance. And then we will talk as a staff, everyone, about next steps and what we will do. This is really, this session was for us as the adults, as professionals, to have a common experience to start talking about this. So I'm going to go into our slide deck in just a minute for the exit slip. But I want us to go slow, to go far. I want us to go together in this conversation. So we really need to proceed thoughtfully, carefully. Don't change really much that you've been doing up until this point. The kids that are coming up on radar and we have questions about, we've been processing through. But I really think PLC Plus is about all of us. There is power in all of us working together. And yeah, if you want to put words of affirmation to Haven right now in the chat, I know they would love to read those in addition to what I'm sure will be put on the exit slip. But just, I can't thank you enough for making this feel like a safe environment for us to expand and explore. The breakout room I was in, we were talking about the complexity of this issue. So that's why we really need to have more conversation, proceed thoughtfully and carefully. Like, I don't want anybody on Monday to have a morning meeting where we go around and say, share your preferred pronouns. We're not there yet, okay? I think we might eventually get there, but let's have conversation about how we'll present. Our next faculty meeting in April will bring back ideas that teams have, that we have together, and we'll proceed thoughtfully and carefully and intentionally, because I love this. We do not have to fully understand to respect and honor another human. We don't tolerate bullying at Mountain View. We don't tolerate teasing. We need to give kids the language and give ourselves the language, right? And give ourselves permission to be vulnerable and learn together. So thank you, thank you, thank you to Haven so much. I want to go in and share my screen for the exit slip here.
Can I ask a quick question of Haven? Haven, do you have contact information?
Yeah,
so
let me
we could
share
reach
it
out
right
to
now.
you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
you
you
for
so
that
much.
reminder.
Thank you, Katie, for asking. Very important. And yes, we'll put it in there. We'll also have link to Haven gave us many, many more resources, and the link to resources, there's a lot there for us to work together on. So thank you.
And then all those resources in the last chunk of the slide deck that y'all have are just some like concrete action steps, like honoring youth's chosen name, pronouns, things like that. So definitely look through all of that for some clear, like, what do I do now? And obviously, like Cindy said, like talking about that as a group, things like that. But there's a lot of different things in there.
And maybe we'll have you come back on our next faculty meeting just to listen and be in the room with us if that works out. I'm just thinking aloud. I see Katie's like, yay! I think that we need all of us working on this together. So thank you. And we started with this, want to end with this. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Maya Angelou. All right, so there's an exit slip here. I'll try to copy it, but really what we'd like to hear from you, I know it's a lot of information, there's a lot to process. This is anonymous exit slip, so I'm not collecting anybody's email addresses, but really curious to hear what is circling around in your head. What did you hear today that squares with your thinking? 3 takeaways or ideas, maybe things that didn't square with your thinking, like this is safe, okay? We need to know where we all are to be able to move forward. I'd really like to know, as a result of this workshop, an action step you'll take professionally. We're not yet at the step of taking this, rolling it out as a school. There's a lot we need to talk about, but I feel like the conversations we've had up until this point about children together at PLCs is going to move us forward. So that's where we are with the exit slip. I'll put that in the slide deck. And then, Rosari, you were going to close us out.
Hello, everybody. I hope you enjoy it and learn. I know I learned a lot, even about this topic and how to be sensitive and how to be respectful of everybody. But this is for the classroom teachers and for any teacher, resource teachers are going to be meeting soon for the next section of our PD with your teams to look at the data. This morning, you all went to the DPLC, and we did what I was very proud. We were pretty much there with everybody, you know. I felt like we were just part of the whole thing. So look, when you start, so we don't redo the work, because I don't want everybody to do double work. Let's use the template that we used this morning for the DPLC, and you're going to use the coaching protocol. Coaching corner protocol is slide 13 to analyze your data. If you're in that section of ready to create an action plan on, with the data that we have from the mid-year, and use the slide 14, and you can just add rows just to present your action plan. And so that way you'll have the work done for the DPLC, and we use that same templates for our work. Done. We're good? Is that, just want to make sure we don't do double work. We're not gonna reinvent the wheel. Okay. If you're gonna have questions, just email me, text me, or just ask right now.